I've had a super satisfying time sewing 2 shirts for my teenage son. This pattern is for men, the one you see today, but there's also a women's version, and this is part 1 of 2. You see me twice today, and the way you sew this shirt is the same way you sew the women's shirt, so you see a lot about that. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I'm really excited to share 2 shirts I've made for my son. If you've been following my channel for a pretty long time, you know that when I started this channel, he was a little child. He was like this big, 10 years old. He's now 17, he's like this big, and over the years, I've been able to sew some things for him. Not that many, more for sure when he was little and he had no idea. But as he grew into teenage years, you know, it wasn't that easy to get to sew for him. In the last couple of years, I've been able to sew for him maybe once or twice a year. And that just fills my heart with joy because there's nothing better for me. I feel so happy. And this time Love Notions has a double pattern release. And one of these patterns is for men, which is amazing. And this is called Band Camp Shirts. I think the name is super cool, Band Camp Shirt. They have a camp collar. I think that's why the name camp is in the title. And in this episode, you'll see all about the men's version. There are a lot of similarities between the men's version and the women's version, and just only a few differences. But in the sewing construction, it'll be pretty much the same. You'll see me twice today because after this one's released, I'll release the women's version as well. They'll just be in separate videos. Also, for your information, if you head over to the Love Notions YouTube channel, there is a video today there made by me where I do a full pattern review for both. I compare it with another pattern from the catalog. And most important of all, if you are intimidated by the camp collar that you see in this shirt, there's no worries because I filmed it in full-on detail over there. So if you want to see how to sew the traditional camp collar, head over to the video that is in the Love Notions YouTube channel. I will link that video down below in the description box so it's easy for you to find. Also, in that video, you also find my affiliate link in the description box over at the Love Notions YouTube channel. You also find it in this video. My affiliate link is everywhere. You don't have to use it. If you do click on my link, it takes you directly to the website. If you end up purchasing, I do make a small commission from that sale that doesn't cost you any extra. You still pay the same. It just supports the work that I do here on YouTube. And because these 2 patterns are brand new, they're going to be $3 off, which is roughly about 25% off for a week. That goes through next Monday, the 16th of September. So there's quite a few days for you to look. I suggest you grab both, the men's and the women's version. I think they're really cool. And if you've never sewn for someone in your family or someone close to you, I think you're missing out because it's super satisfying. So the Band Camp shirt, I'll go over the features of the men's version here. As you can see, there is a camp collar. Now, the difference between the camp collar with the men's version and the women's version has nothing to do with the technique. It's just, it looks a little different because the men's collar finishes up higher. So it's a little more closed. It's just the way that men wear their shirts. There's very few men that wear their shirts fully open and show all their chest. That is just not a vibe, at least in my household. So they come up higher than the women's one, which is a little deeper, a little wider. But that's the only difference. It's just a small visual difference, but the technique will be exactly the same. This camp collar is easy because it's got an integrated facing. So all the area that goes on the inside is just an extension of the front piece. That's the area that you interface. It uses a traditional camp collar technique that, as I mentioned, is in the Love Notions YouTube video that's over there on their YouTube channel. I also do have a super in-depth video about camp collars on my channel. I will leave it down below as well. It's much more in depth because that tutorial is 100% focused on the Band Camp shirt, but you know, there's lots of variations to this technique and I cover all of those in the video I have on my channel. All the buttons go down the front. There could be 5 or 6. Usually men use a larger distance between buttons than what we do. We typically worry about gaping for the bust and that sort of thing, which tends not to be that much of an issue for men's versions. So you probably use less buttons, but you might end up using more because there's other features in the shirt that would require more buttons, like patch pockets. There are patch pockets that are super simple, just a rectangle, or you can sew cargo pockets that have a pleat in the center. There is a little flap that you can sew there. You can put a button there. For the sleeves, you have short sleeves with a cuff, optional button tab with a button. There goes an extra button. You can sew that if you want to or not. And then you have long sleeves. The long sleeves have a tower placket with a cuff, more buttons. There's one extra thing that's optional that you can add, and it's a tab on the inside that will allow you to fold that cuff up and hold it in place and then sort of wear it 3/4 length. So it depends on the features that you're choosing for your version. You'll probably need between 5 to 12 buttons. There is one cool feature that the men's band cap shirt has, is that you have a color blocked option. So there is a front that's divided in two. It doesn't actually have shaping there. It's just an extra seam, and you can sew different colors there. Now, I know nothing about bowling because I'm in a country where bowling is not a thing. I've never actually stepped foot in a bowling place. Looks like fun. But I've been told this could be like a bowling shirt as well. It just depends on how you make it. It would be perfect for that. And I know I've heard that a lot during the testing period. So go ahead and make it as a bowling shirt. I think it would be perfect. At the back, you have two options. You have a simple back with no details. That would be easier if you're newer to shirt making. And then you have a yoke at the back with 2 layers. You can enclose the shoulder seams and the bottom seam of the yoke using a burrito method. The back piece that goes underneath will have a pleat. So that's one option if you want to make the back more interesting. Also, this option with the pleat will give you a bit more space in general at the waist area and the hip area. So if you need that for your person that you're sewing, could be an option that you think about. I know my son loves it because he likes loose things. You know, it's a teenage thing. You'd rarely see a teenager wearing fitted things. It's just not how they live. So when I told him about the options, plain back or the one with a bit extra space, he's like, the one with extra space. So that's the one that he wanted. I know my husband, who's in his 50s, would be on the other extreme. He'd be, no, I want it more fitted. I mean, not fitted, but less ease. He would prefer the simple back option, I'm sure. So it's always good to ask and not just assume. Another little detail that you have in the band cam shirt is splits on the side.
You have a little opening right there, which will give you some extra ease. And when you look at the pattern pieces, that area at the bottom of the size will go into a larger seam allowance to allow that technique right there.
This is designed for woven fabrics, obviously. It's a shirt. I would not be making this with a knit. It's just not appropriate. So light to medium weight wovens are going to work really well. So many options here, and with the more structured fabrics, you can have an easier time working with them. 100% linen would be super luxe. Linen rayon blend, linen cotton blend. I know there are some amazing cotton shirtings that could work either for you or for men or for anyone. Chambray. I would be a little bit cautious with tencel because it can have a slight sheen to it. I know my son would not like anything that has a slight sheen to it. He would like all his fabrics to be totally matte. So that's something to think about. And then there's flannel. You can find all sorts of plaid and all sorts of things that would be cool, long sleeve, winter version. And then flowy fabrics, 100% rayon. I know my son is addicted to 100% rayon shirts. The first time I bought him one was probably when he was around 10 years old. And up to that point, he'd just been wearing cotton shirts his whole life. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is so light, so fresh, so soft, you know. And then it's been really hard for him to wear shirts that are not made out of rayon. So I know that is a real big favorite of his. And then there's rayon twill, which is a nice matte fabric. You could make it in a solid or a print. Then there's the rayon with a small amount of linen in the blend. That's really nice. I've got some shirting material like that as well. So my options, basically, 2 options. One is a solid shirting, 70% rayon, 30% linen, that's black. The other option is a print, tropical print, that is 87% rayon, 13% linen. Sort of light to medium weight. None of these fabrics are lightweight. I want to show you some other options that if I would have had time, I would have sewn more. But you know, I've had to sew 2 for him and 2 for myself. That's 4 shirts, that's quite a lot. So he took a little dive in my stash to choose his fabrics. And let me show you one cotton that he liked. These are cotton shirting I got years ago. I got it for myself, but it would be so appropriate for him as well. This is navy, and look at the tiny, tiny leaves on there. They're white, terracotta, and beige. It's so nice. It's just so nice. And because the print is super little, I think it's super appropriate for him as well. So this would be an amazing shirt for him for church. He's got navy pants. They will look amazing with brown shoes, navy pants. And the shirt, I think that would be amazing. And I wish I would have had time to sew it. But we'll make a list. We'll get some more done for him as time goes by. Here is a 100% rayon version. This is a navy background as well, and it's got vertical features. It's just a really, really interesting print because it's like stripes, but not really, not the neat type of stripes. It's not a floral, it's not geometric. It's just really interesting. I think really appropriate for him as well. Very soft, very drapey. He really liked that fabric. And then the other one he chose is also a tropical print, but more toned down. It's just black background with all this print here with white and beige. He really likes the black and white. I don't know where he gets it from. I love it too. Maybe he's just seen it a lot on me. I don't know, but he really enjoys the black and white. For him, wearing black jeans and then something like this would just be the perfect outfit. So yeah, I've got 3 options. I'm not going to make myself anything with these fabrics because they are for him. And yeah, I'm happy he likes fabrics from my collection. You know, sometimes you think they're not going to like anything that's there. But I don't buy everything pink and not everything has a bunch of flowers. So he liked those and I'm happy. The sizing goes from extra small to 5X. That goes up to a chest and a hip of 58 inches. So in the men's sizing chart, it's quite different to women's. Of course, they have a different shape. You know, when you look at the body measurements, you see that the chest and the hips have the same measurement for the size, and then it goes a little in at the waist. So it's pretty much a rectangle like men are usually shaped. It's a boxy design. There's quite a nice amount of ease. So to choose your size, you need to take these circumferences, chest, waist, which can be variable for men. It's really hard to determine where it is. I would say in the midsection, just find the place that has the largest circumference just to be sure. And then the hip, find that circumference, see the size chart. If you end up with measurements that have 2 different sizes, just choose that largest size just to make sure everything's going to fit. You know, this is not a tailored garment. You know, if it's a little loose in some area, it'll be fine. It's part of the style. Length depends on the size you're making. If you measure from here down to the hem, 29.5 to 31.5 inches, depends on the size that you're making. If you're confused, ask the person you're making the shirt for to get you one of their shirts that they like and then compare. And then you'll know if you need to make it shorter, if you need to make it longer. And it's just so easy to lengthen or shorten because it's quite straight. Cut your pattern piece apart, add or overlap, and you'll be able to do your length adjustments easy. The ease that you'll get in the band camp shirt is 5 inches at the chest, 5 inches at the hip. What I did with my son was take his measurements, and his waist and his hips were size large, but then his chest was between a medium and a large. So I decided to go in to a medium only at the shoulders and the neckline, just to make sure this was going to fit properly. So that's what I did. It was easy blending. I mean, everything's large. It's just this area here that is medium on the yoke pieces and the neckline area right there. My son's 6 foot tall. I measured one of his ready-to-wear shirts, measured this, it was fine. I didn't make any length adjustments. So the length that you see on him is the original length. I know some testers made their shirts longer because they have taller people or their person likes it longer or whatnot. Super easy to adjust and customize for that. Now about sewing, we use a 3/8 seam allowance everywhere. There's only one section where you have to fold in the facing inside by 1/2 inch, but that's the only seam allowance that differs to the whole rest of the pattern. And if you've seen the video I uploaded a few hours ago, you have seen the way I've sewn these collars. Because I've chosen the version with the yoke and the back detail, I have 2 layers of the yoke. I was able to sandwich the collar between the yoke, and I didn't need to sew the traditional camp collar technique. I could do the traditional technique with the 2 yokes there, but I decided to use the fact that there were 2 layers in there to sandwich the collar in between. It makes it easy, you don't need snips, and it's just a different way to do it. So go ahead and look at that previous video because you'll see all the construction of the shirt, basically even the burrito method. I decided to add the sewing section for the band camp collar in this video because I assume it's shorter than the one I'm going to make for women. These are the pattern pieces for this version of the band camp shirt. This is a men's version. This is the version that has a yoke, and a piece below the yoke at the back. There is a version that's just a back with no yoke. This one does have it. So there's 2 layers of the yoke. We use a burrito method to enclose the seams. This is the back that's on the fold right there. Here is the front. The black area you see is the integrated facing. So there isn't a separate piece that you have to sew on. There is a line where you have the guide to do this interfacing. Over there is a short sleeve that I'm doing. There's also a longer sleeve with a cuff and a towel placket, but it's too hot. I'm not doing long sleeves. The paper that you see there is a sleeve cuff. For this version, I'm not doing that. I'm going to hem it normally, which is not an official part of the pattern. You can see there is a cuff piece there. It's a rectangle. There's also a patch pocket. I have done a patch pocket with other versions, but this version is not going to have one. Simple patch pockets like this. And there are also cargo pockets that are a little wider and have a pleat in the middle. And there's also a flap that you can sew. Collar pieces. There's 2 that are cut from the same pattern piece. This one is the upper collar that's interfaced right here. At the bottom, we have the under collar that is not interfaced, and I have already pinned them together just to get some work done ahead of time. There's also another version for the men, which has the front piece divided into 2. So you would have a seam right there, so you can do color blocking. It's a men's shirt, so there's no shaping into that seam. It's just so that you can do color blocking. The fit would be exactly the same. So instead of 1 piece, you would have 2 pieces divided like that. This is a shirt that has a camp style collar. This is the front, and it's got an integrated facing, which means the black area there is the facing. It's just an extension of the front. When you fold it back, it incorporates the neckline and part of the shoulder. Now first, before anything, we need to stay stitch. I'm going to stay stitch the back neckline for both of the yokes. That's super important. And I'm also going to stay stitch all of this area right here, because this area of the facing is also the neckline. Later when we sew the collar, we're going to use a 3/8 seam allowance. So this stay stitching around the neckline needs to be a little bit smaller than that. That's one back yoke neckline done. Now I'm going to repeat the same with the other back neckline. Now the front neckline is similar. It's just that half is interfaced and half isn't. This is a step that you really can't skip unless you want this to stretch out as you sew and then have the collar be too short for your neckline. You need to protect the curve of the neckline here with the stay stitch. Here we have 2 yoke pieces. The necklines have already been stay stitched, and here we have our back piece. This is the back piece that has a pleat. You'll see a mark on the pattern. I have already sewn my pleat. I prefer to do an inverted box pleat, so I sew my pleat from the wrong side. You can see that is just a basting stitch, half of the volume to one side, half to the other, and then I get an inverted box pleat. If you wanted your shirt to look like this on the outside, which would be a box pleat, then you would sew the pleat the other way. What you do there basically is fold the pleat like this, wrong sides together, sew your pleat, and then it would look like that. So it doesn't matter which one you like. I think both are valid. You'll see both in garments everywhere. I just prefer the inverted box pleat. So I've already sewn that and pressed it. Now what we want to do is sandwich this between these 2. I'm going to take one of these yokes, any of them. I have the straight side of the yoke up like that. I'm going to put my back piece right there, right sides together. And then I'm going to take my other yoke, and this one is going to be right side to wrong side over here. So if I were to pull away this back piece, the yoke pieces would be right sides together if the back wasn't there. This one's right side to wrong side, and these 2 are right sides together. They all have the same length, so it's just a straight seam there to unite them together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is a very straight seam, quite simple, and we're uniting 3 layers of fabric here. Okay, the horizontal seam of the yoke has been sewn. This is the right side. This is the wrong side. It looks really nice. So let's just put our back piece on the table, right sides together. And now we're going to bring our 2 front pieces and align them at the shoulder seams. This is this side here, matching it up there, leaving this integrated facing towards the center. We're not going to touch that side first. And then this one's going to go on that side. This is the other integrated facing in the center here. So we're only going to sew the shoulder seam to the first layer of the yoke right here. That second layer that's at the bottom is going to be left free. And the seam that we're going to sew now is just a basting stitch. Longer stitch length, smaller than the 3/8 seam allowance we're going to use later for the definite stitch here of the shoulders. Sewn that little seam there, smaller than 3/8 seam allowance. Now we're just going to bring all of this into the center, and we're going to start rolling this up. When we roll this up, we're going to find that second yoke that's under here by itself. We're going to bring it and align it to the shoulder seams that we've just sewn. This ends up being a burrito, and this is how we're going to sew that shoulder seam and that shoulder seam now with a 3/8 seam allowance. So let me just repeat. You take your shirt, wrong sides up, you have all your facing pieces right there, your shoulder seams that you've just sewn there, but those are just temporary. And then you roll up your shirt. When you roll it up, you're going to find that second layer of the yoke underneath. You're going to bring it over and form your little row. Now we sew the shoulder seams, 3/8 seam allowance at this point with a regular stitch length, not the basting stitch that I did before. And that is how we enclose the shoulder seams. Okay, there we have it. Now, this is why stay stitching this neckline was so important beforehand, because now we're going to manipulate and bring it all out through the neckline. So if you had this all raw, you could stretch it out. So that is how we enclosed the shoulder seams right there, super neatly, both sides. And we also have enclosed the back horizontal seam of the yoke. Here we have 2 layers of the yoke. What I'm going to do just to make it easier is just do a quick basting stitch just to hold them in place. We're going to deal with layers and curves and all of that, and I don't want to be worried about this shifting. So I'd rather these 2 layers act like one piece and just do a quick basting stitch so that it can act like a single layer even though we have 2 layers of fabric there. At this point, we have our camp collar sewn in. This has been sewn in using the traditional method. Remember, there is separate content all about this technique in full detail. I will link that down below for you. When I've done my collar, I feel like I'm done with the blouse basically, but I'm not. If you're doing the full bust option for the women's version, you're going to have bust darts here. If you're not doing the full bust option, you're not going to have darts. If you're doing the men's version, obviously you're not going to have darts. So this is something that needs to happen right now. I'm going to quickly do that. When I sew my darts, I have already confirmed that the positioning is okay because I've done flat pattern measurements. I did actually have to lower this bust dart by 5/8 of an inch, so I'm happy with that positioning. And I've already sewn a garment that confirmed that, so that's good. I always start sewing from the dart point. I just let the needle get into the fabric with my hand. I don't backstitch there, leave a good amount of thread so you can do a little knot by hand, and then I go and sew towards the widest part of the dart. That's how I do all my darts. I think you get really a good control of where the needle enters the fabric, and the tip of the dart is going to look super, super neat. After that, we press the dart volume down. And then I can go ahead and serge these sides because I'm going to be pressing these side seams open. I suggest you do that because we have little slits down the side. So it's much easier to just press the whole side seam open and just stop at one point. After sewing that bust dart, I can finally align these side seams. If you don't have bust darts, ignore these, but the side seams are pretty straightforward. Just sew from the armhole area down until a little dot you're going to see on your fabric. That is where the slit is going to start, and that's where you see the hem allowance got wider. That's super easy to do. This is a tropical shirt that I made. This is the one that you saw in the video about enclosing the collar between the yoke. A little bit of a different burrito method there that encloses the bottom seam of the yoke. Here is my pleat. I like sewing pleats to have, so it's an inverted box pleat on this side. But you can sew it the other way around, and that's how the pattern shows it. I kept it really discreet. I didn't do much top stitching. I didn't top stitch the collar, but you can do that if you want. And this is the version that just has a simple hem right here. I didn't have enough to cut the cuff, so I had enough to make the sleeve just an inch longer through the side over there so that the hem makes sense. And then I get a really nice smooth sleeve. Slits were really easy to sew. I like pressing the seams open. Martin was gracious enough to be able to model for us. Let's see him with his shirt on. This is the second version that I made. I know it's black, I know it's boring, but a black shirt can be a real classic. At least for him, he'd always wanted to have a black shirt. He likes dressing in black and whatnot. So this is amazing because it's his first black shirt. For the inner yoke here, I used a shirt of his that was little, that was tucked away. I saved all his little shirts and I reused them to make bias tape and things like that. The difference here is that I did sew a simple pocket right there, just on one side. That's enough. He's not going to put things in there. For the yoke, I did some edge stitching, and there's my inverted box pleat. My cuffs are right here. So this time I did not skip the cuffs. What I didn't add was the button tab. I thought I wanted to make this one look a little more formal than informal. So I think the button tab can make it look really casual straight away. That's why I didn't do the button tab, but it's up to you. I mean, this is a structured fabric. Cuff holds up really well on its own. I just gave it a good press. It's not going to be flopping over or anything like that. Now, if you're ever confused about where the buttonholes go, because when we sew for ourselves, we know that the buttonholes go on the right. On the men's, it just goes on the left wearer side. So if you're ever in doubt, just run to the closet, get a shirt that belongs to him and just check and confirm you'll be okay. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. My husband was like, oh, I want one too. So yeah, let's see it on. I hope this episode inspired you to sew for other people. My husband wants one too. Now that he's seen the shirts I've made Mats and my son, now my husband has requested some too. So I'm going to be pretty happy. I'm sure I'm going to make my dad one as well eventually. So I'm very, very happy that this pattern exists. It can bring you a lot of joy to sew for someone else, someone really close to you. And it's just the best thing. They get to choose the fabrics, show them the liner, get them to choose between all the options. And you're going to end up happy and they're going to end up happy. And it's just so satisfying. What can I say? I'm just like all smiles right here because it's just the best thing. Remember that the band cam shirt is both for men and for women. There's different versions. You'll see the video about my versions next. Both patterns are on their release sale through next Monday, the 16th of September. My link is always at the top of the comment section, pinned, and also in the description box, so it's easy for you to find. I'll see you again super soon with the episode all about the women's Bandcamp shirt and the ones I made for myself. See you there. Bye.